Only a few miles north of the border sits the village of Linton. This Scottish village is incredibly old, tracing its roots back thousands of years to an old Iron Age fort. But during the 12th century, the village became besieged by fear. Local villagers began disappearing. Some said it was the work of bandits and outlaws, but most knew it was something far more sinister. A great evil lurked near the village, a gigantic and ferocious serpent, the Great Worm of Linton. In a hollow on the north side of Linton Hill, there was an area known as the Worm's Den. It was said by the villagers that within the den dwelled a serpentine dragon. They told tales of the Great Worm roaming the land and devouring the local livestock. It would emerge from its lair and devastate the local countryside. Many brave or foolish men would set off to slay the dragon, but none would ever return. The news of this so-called dragon would reach the ears of one William Somerville, the Laird of Lariston. William was a brave and daring warrior. He decided he would go and see if the tales of the serpent were true, and headed to Linton. On his way, he passed through the village of Jedburgh, where the locals would tell him dreadful tales of the Great Worm. In some, the worm would sprout wings and fly. In others, the beast would spray a toxic venom from its mouth, which would kill any man instantly. These outlandish stories would only fuel William's curiosity. He continued on his journey, and a few days later arrived in Linton. When William entered the village, he could see no one, and there was a strange, almost eerie mist that seemed to hang over the whole area. There was a grim, destitute feeling in the village of Linton. William, upon searching, found a local blacksmith. The smith explained that the people of the village had either left to live with relatives or spent most of their time hiding in fear of the Great Worm. So there was at least some truth to these wild tales, thought William. He asked the smith about the creature and inquired as to its nature. "The Great Worm is very real," said the smith, "although some of the tales you have been told are not. It sounds very much like the people of Jedburgh have been getting carried away with themselves. There are no wings or breath of venom, only a 10 to 15 foot long serpent which could swallow a sheep whole and has killed many brave men." William thanked the smith and decided that he would go and scout out the worm for himself. The smith pointed him in the direction of the worm's den and told him the best time to see the beast was at sunset. Since the sun was already low in the sky, William wasted no time in travelling to the worm's den. He took up a position on top of the hill, looking over the den, and lay in wait. As the light dimmed, William heard a strange guttural sound emanating from the cave. As darkness came down fully, William heard some great mass slither out of the cave, but could see nothing. The only source of light was a torch he had lit. Fear grasped the daring adventurer. He was surrounded by grunts and slithering sounds. Then, as though born from the darkness itself, the Great Worm of Linton reared above the torch. It was only but a few feet from William, and as it hissed, its large boar-like mouth opened to reveal razor-sharp fangs. The monster arched its back as though preparing to strike, and William, with his many years of battle-hardened training, took this opportunity to lunge the beast and attacked furiously with his torch. As the flames touched the serpent, it recoiled in pain and gave a horrifying shriek. William took this opportunity to run with all haste to his horse and rode to Linton, never looking back. As the brave warrior returned to the village, the blacksmith could see the pale white of his face. "It would seem that your wish to see the Great Worm of Linton was granted," called the smith. "That it was," panted William, still in shock. He would then spend a restless night on the floor of the village barn, his mind filled with the sharp teeth and black, soulless eyes he had seen that night. On the next morning, William once again engaged the smith. "I require your aid," said William. "Does your horse need shoeing or some such, so you can return home?" questioned the blacksmith. Nonsense, smiled William. I mean to kill the beast, and I require a lance fit for purpose. With much arguing and persuasion, William eventually convinced the smith he was serious, and not mad, although that may be a matter of opinion also. William gave the smith instructions to build a lance far larger than most, and around a foot from the tip, there would be a circular metal cage. It would take the smith a few days to create this strange weapon, but during this time, William would take a standard lance and attach to it brimstone and peat, which he would cover in pitch. The end of the lance would be set alight, and he would ride back and forth through the village. This strange spectacle would confuse the remaining villagers, but there had been so many foolhardy warriors, they paid William's odd behaviour little attention. When asked about his unopposed fire jousting, William said that his horse must be prepared to handle the foul-smelling, acrid smoke produced by his fiery concoction, so that it could be deployed in battle. In time, both the lance and the horse were prepared. The circular cage on the lance was filled with brimstone and peat before being covered in thick black pitch. William was ready to face the dragon. He set off for the worm's den in late afternoon. He reached the cave of the beast just as the sun was falling in the sky. He lit a torch and planted it in the ground, a short distance from the cave entrance. Then he went forward to tempt the serpent. The warrior would beat his armour, shout and challenge the worm. Once again, he heard the guttural sounds and movement. Quickly he rode back to the torch, lowered the gigantic lance, and set it ablaze. The great worm of Linton slithered out of its dark cave and saw the warrior charging straight towards him. William was surrounded by the smell of acrid smoke and horse's breath. As the great worm's colossal jaws opened wide, aiming to swallow him whole, the flaming lance plunged deep inside the open maw of the beast. The serpent let out an earth-shattering scream as its death throes tore the lance from William's hand. The great worm of Linton had been dealt a mortal blow that day. No longer would it ravage the land and consume the lives of the Linton villagers. William was hailed as a hero. He had killed the beast and saved the village in their time of need. Word of William's achievement reached the king, and the brave warrior was knighted and given a position of honour. Sir William Somerville, Royal Falconer, and Baron of Linton would remain in the town he saved, as would his descendants for many, many years to come. To this very day in the town of Linton, there's a large carved stone at the local church which depicts Somerville's battle with the Great Worm. As with most tales of legend and myth, there are many different versions. In some, the brave warrior was named John Somerville, and the description and size of the draconic serpent seem to change with each telling. There is also a lot of conflicting information on the lance that was created. It was described as a large lance, much longer than a jousting lance. On 1 foot from its end was placed a wheel. Some have suggested that this so-called wheel allowed the lance tip to pivot up and down. Some say it acted like a Catherine wheel attached to the lance. It was said that the peat, brimstone and pitch were attached to this wheel. So I believe it was not that complicated. It was just a method of containing the sulphur and peat. This is still represented in the family's crest, which depicts a dragon atop a wheel. James Somerville, the 11th Lord of Somerville, and supposed descendant of William, wrote in his book, The History of Somervilles, that the lands of Linton had been granted to William Somerville in 1174 by William the Lion, King of Scots. In the old records of Linton, kept by the church, the name Somerville first appears in 1136. This could correlate with the other dates mentioned. Perhaps this Somerville was John, and 38 years later, his son William would defeat the Great Worm of Linton, if such a terrible beast ever truly existed. Thank you for listening.